Professor Dame Helen Atkinson, it's wonderful to have you join us at Imperial today. Thank you so much for being a part of our alumni series. We're looking forward to hearing more about your time at Imperial and beyond, so let's find out more. You were the first in your family to attend university, so could you tell us a bit more about your journey into engineering?
So I went to a very straightforward school, an ordinary school in the state system in the UK. I was really interested in science, particularly in physics. It was a school that didn't have a very strong tradition of sending children to university to study science or engineering. I went to university to study physics, and while I was at university, I discovered materials science, and I just thought it was the most amazing subject. I loved it, loved it much more than physics. Right? And I loved the fact that when you look down a microscope, you see these beautiful structures, and you see they're not just beautiful structures, they're structures that mean something. So the fact that a metal gains its strength and its toughness actually from the way the crystals are arranged, the fact that a ceramic can be incredibly strong but also very brittle because of the nature of the bonding. I just found the whole thing really beautiful and absolutely fascinating. Now, is that engineering? It's one route into engineering, and I think one of the amazing things about engineering is that it's got so many different branches, and materials is one of the routes into engineering.
So you came to Imperial for your PhD. What would you say your fondest memory here is?
So I came to Imperial actually as part of my job. I was very, very fortunate to be sponsored to do my PhD by my employer. And I used to come to Imperial to see my supervisor, who was Professor Brian Steele, once a month. And the amazing thing for me was walking across Hyde Park from Paddington Station, and it just being incredibly beautiful every part of the year. It was just such a beautiful place. And I think when I look at the experience students must have, to be here, to live here with the Science Museum and the V&A Museum and the Natural History Museum, and then the park as well. Students at Imperial are incredibly fortunate.
So tell me about your PhD.
So because I was based with the Atomic Energy Authority, they were my employer, they were really interested in how quickly oxide scales, so a bit like rust, actually develops on the metallic alloy that forms the canister that encapsulates the fuel in a nuclear reactor, a civil nuclear reactor. And we wanted to understand how quickly those oxide scales develop, because as they develop, they consume the metal underneath. So the canister actually gets thinner, the wall of the canister. And so I was doing a lot of very detailed transmission electron microscopy, understanding how quickly these oxide films were growing and understanding what controlled the growth. And my supervisor at Imperial was a great expert in ceramic materials, and oxides are ceramics. And so it was absolutely fantastic to come and discuss the work with Professor Brian Steele every month, and to let him know what my progress was and what I was planning to do next, and to gain his wisdom and his insight about the best way to steer the research.
So you were doing your PhD whilst based in industry. Do you think it's important for students to gain that experience in industry?
I feel it's incredibly important, whether as an undergraduate or indeed my own experience, which was I was already in a job in industry when I did my PhD with Imperial. But I look back, I had experience in industry when I was an undergraduate. I think it changed my understanding of what kind of role I wanted to go into when I graduated. And I think that if you go and get experience in industry, you gain a much more rounded view of where what you're studying actually fits in. So it helps you to understand why you're learning what you're learning whilst you're at university. So it is incredibly important.
So tell me about your role now.
So I'm now the Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Aerospace, Transport Systems and Manufacturing at Cranfield University, Cranfield University is a purely postgraduate university based about an hour north of London. It's the only university in Europe with its own aircraft, its own airport, its own pilots and its own air traffic control services. And some of the Imperial students actually come to Cranfield to fly on our aircraft. And when I look at how important materials science and engineering is to the future of all of those technologies, aerospace, aviation, transport systems more generally, and manufacturing, it is just the foundation of the whole of those topics. We need novel materials and novel structures for aerospace of the future, for example, flying taxis. We need really good understanding about things like rolling contact fatigue to understand what controls the degradation of railways. We need incredibly good understanding of circularity in the use of materials right through the life of components and structures and systems. So how do we make sure that instead of things going to disposal at the end of their life, the materials get reused, recycled, remanufactured so that we minimize the impact on the planet. So materials is just utterly fundamental to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
You became a chartered engineer. Why was that important?
Chartered engineer is a world-recognized and very respected qualification. It recognizes both your learning, the foundation with your education, and also your industrial experience. I was, and to some extent still am, in quite a male-dominated profession, and I knew that if I achieved chartered engineer, it would be something that was respected and could not be taken away from me, so a real qualification to value. So I was very fortunate that my employer did support me to actually achieve it.
You were the first woman president of the Engineering Professors Council in its 50-year history, and you are a leading advocate of women in STEM. So what advice would you give to women in engineering?
So the Engineering Professors Council represents engineering in higher education throughout the UK. So it's an incredible honour when I was made the first woman president. What would I say to young women considering going into engineering? First thing is to be confident, because you will be talented at engineering. The second thing to say is to be yourself. Don't feel you have to be anything other than yourself. Thirdly, to be persistent. My own experience was that there were people around who thought they knew it all. I knew I didn't know it all, and my friends and I, we worked really hard at understanding difficult concepts that weren't always easy to get immediately. And because we were persistent and we supported each other, we did get that understanding. And I think that is the key to everything. Keeping going, keeping persisting, being confident, being yourself, and really enjoying what you do, because if you enjoy it, you will excel at it. So that's my advice.
You've been the worthy recipient of many awards, including being made a Dame and being made a Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Is there a recognition that you find particularly memorable?
So to be made a Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering was an amazing thing. When I was made Fellow, which is in 2007, I was the 29th woman in the whole of the history of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and there are about 1,400 men, so tiny number of women. There are more now, it's gone up since then. But when I heard I was going to be made a Dame, that was just stunning, because something for someone like me, where I come from a family where both my parents left school at 16, for me to be made a Dame was just an incredible thing. Something where I really recognise the wonderful teams I've worked with throughout my life. It's a real sense of that. But when I went to receive it a few weeks ago, it was Prince William, and he talked to me about hydrogen to fuel aircraft. So it was a great conversation to have with him, and a huge honour to go to Windsor Castle to receive it.
What advice would you give a student considering material science and engineering as a career?
that it's such a super career to go into. It's got so many routes through it. It's this meshing together of physics and chemistry and mathematics and manufacturing, this whole range of different topics really within engineering. But it's got this great potential to lead in so many interesting routes and avenues. And I am the living embodiment of that. I would never have dreamed that I could end up being Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Aerospace, Transport and Manufacturing. But it's my Materials Science and Engineering Foundation that's enabled me to reach to that.